Thank you very much. Yes, as Athens. I hope I get that right. That's all what I know about Greek language. So, hello everyone. We'll spend the next 40 minutes or so talking about how we can increase our velocity, ship things faster, hopefully in a safe and secure manner. But before jumping into the interesting part, the boring part, I am Mohammed. I work in a company called Spotify. It's a music streaming service. As a backend engineer, I'm also one of the Google developer experts in the cloud area. Moving on, we all know that the need for speed and innovation is anywhere. Nowadays, users no longer want to wait for months, weeks, or even days to get their feature shipped, the new functionalities added to the application, their bugs fixed, the user experience improved, the speed of their application improved as well. Users want things to get approved fast. They want them now. However, speed alone is not enough. We all know a company that was bragging about how fast they are moving. It was even part of their mottos, moving fast. However, they soon hit a roadblock because they forgot about security, right? And once security is missing, security is like air. When it's around, nobody notices it. But when it's missing, everybody starts screaming. So security is really important because it's keep the trust between you and your users. And when it's missing, then your business starts struggling. And that's what Devsecups basically tries to do. Now, to be honest, I hate the name. Devsecups is bad, but it sits the ground of what we are going to talk about in the next 30 minutes or so. So DevOps is definitely required. It proves it works. It enables to have a better communication between the developers and the operations. Helps you, once the features are there, deploy them as fast as possible. However, security is also required to ensure that the things that we ship to production are secure. And damn. Give me a minute here. Oops. I think I will continue without that. So Devsecups try to save a seat in the table for everyone. It tries to enable the developers to do what they do best, basically. Fix bugs, introduce new features, improve the user experience, and it also allows the developers to, or the operations to, once those features are ready to get deployed, to make them and deploy them into production. And it allows also the security people and save a seat in the table to the security to make sure that our application, our artifacts, our releases are actually secure and safe as well. So you'll probably guess that this talk is going to be about Formula One. How many folks here know what Formula One is? Okay, that's all of you. Awesome. How many of you watch and fan actually Formula One? Few hands, not bad. How many actually are aware of Drive to Survive documentary? Few hands, awesome. So for the other part of the room, Drive to Survive is basically a docu-series. It's not a documentary, it's not a series, it's like a mix of both. It tells the behind the scenes of the weekends of the Formula One. So the weekend of the Formula One starts on Thursday, Friday, it's on Sunday, a couple of practice sessions, qualifying, and then the race, which is on Sunday, which is the big event. And there is a race, and this Drive to Survive tries to sell the behind-the-scenes stories, the drama that is going on in an entertaining way, you know, the Netflix way. And I started watching it actually during the pandemic. I was a fan of the Formula One, and then during the pandemic, I had a lot of time, nothing to do, a lot of time to kill, so I started watching it. And it's pretty good, until this actually happens. So Roma was a driver from the Haas team. He was driving at 300 kilometers per hour. Bad maneuver, tires lock up, and then the car hit the barrier and turned instantly into a fireball. And the car split into two, and you can see like it's by any means a deadly incident. And even the people of the Formula One were super scared about the incidents. So the race was suspended. Everyone was trying to rush into the accident area to try to save Roma from the accident. But they were super worried. And one of the FIA people, which is the organization that oversees the Formula One, says that if he could survive this incident, it's actually a miracle. But what happened is, the miracle actually happened. Roma managed to get safe and sane out from such incident by his own feet. He managed to get out of the fireball from the extreme heat on his own feet. He stayed there for a couple of minutes. And that's actually got me thinking. The Formula One, the teams, the cars, the architects, and the FIA must be doing a lot of things right to actually ensure the safety of the drivers, even in such a deadly incident. And that got me thinking, what would happen if we designed our systems, our architectures, our application with the same level of devotion, keeping the safety of the drivers the top priority of everything we built. Now, the Formula One cars are super fast, so they don't compromise with speed, they don't compromise with the safety as well. So if we can have that balance, it would be good for both us as developers in the IT sector and also for our users to keep their data secure, basically. Now, throughout the documentary and throughout the episode, they'll mention little security, and they keep mentioning safety. And I'm not a native English speaker, so I use them interchangeably. And for me, they mean the same. So I opened the dictionary and found that security means the state of being free from danger or threat. Now, if you think about it, this is not actually what we're trying to do when we build our systems, right? We know from the moment we put our application facing the internet, there are hundreds of things that threaten our application. There are hundreds of malicious users that are trying to sneak into our application, exploit their vulnerabilities, and bring the application to its knees. However, safety means the condition of being protected from danger, risk, or injury. And this is what we're trying to achieve with all the security processes that we put, right? We know that there are a lot of things that threaten our application and our systems, and we know there are a lot of things that might go wrong, and we try to make sure that we are as safe as we can be, as secure as we can be, and as resilient as we can be. And that means our architecture, or good architecture, should allow us, developers, the ops, the security folks, everyone in the IT sector, to move as fast as possible, to deliver things faster, to deliver functionalities faster, to deliver features faster, in a safe manner. So, after that, I started thinking and reading a lot about the Formula One regulations, how to design the car, and started to mind map some of the things that are similar in the software architecture industry. And in this talk, we're going to talk about 10 measures. Five of them are pre-crash measures, as they call them, which the thing that they ensure before the accidents happen. And 5 of them are post-crash measures, the thing that they do to react to the incident and make sure to rescue the driver as soon as possible. And this is baked by data. And hopefully, as it helped the Formula One and the motorsport in general to ensure that it's a safe sport even when the drivers go in at a lightning speed, hopefully it would help to make to help us to build resilient systems that are secure as well. And you can see that as we introduced more regulation in the Formula Ones, the number of deaths has drastically decreased. And the last one was in 2014. And the number of days between fatal incidents had also grown a lot as we introduced more and more regulations to ensure the safety of the drivers. Okay, let's the fun begin. First 5 are pre-crash measures, which again are the things that we do and ensure before the crash happens and before the race even. And the first one is the drivers were seat belt that is different than the one we have in our cars or normal cars, which basically have a 6-point harness, and it looks like this. So when the driver gets into the car, it has a 6-point harness built, and they can't fasten the seat belt on their own. They need the help of the team and the crew. However, when they want to release and get out of the car, by a press of a button, the seat belt gets released. And if you think about it, this is actually similar to the push-to-deploy analogy in the software engineering, right? And it can be achieved by pushing further the automation. So automation is really important in the software engineering in a sense. It enables to free up time from your resources, meaning that they can pursue other creative things, interesting things, rather than doing the manual work. We as humans are not good in the manual work and the repetitive tasks. Machines excel in that. So by pursuing automation, we basically try to limit the errors that generates from the manual work. And finally, automation helps to increase transparency. If something happened, we can track back what was the cause of this and fix it or roll back. So there is a sense of transparency, blameless one in the team. So that was the first one. The second one is they have a stringent dynamic, static, and load test to ensure the safety of the drivers. And that means that when they are building the car, they have simulators in the factory to test the car performance, to get the car reaction across different conditions. Once they have built the car, they basically test it in real life, in real tracks, in different conditions. They test it when it's a wet, rainy day, windy day, very hot day, very humid day, and they gather data to check how the car is basically reacting to ensure how the car will react in terms of different conditions it will basically run through in a race day or a race weekend. And this is the equivalent of having a trusted, repeatable, and most importantly, adversarial CI/CD pipeline. And adversarial here means that we welcome everyone's feedback to build our CI/CD pipeline. Not only the developers, not only the operations, but also the security folks, making sure that security is not left over in the right end of our pipeline, but included in every and each step from the moment we start including or writing the code. And this is great for alignment and saving a seat, and everyone's voice is heard in building our CI/CD pipeline that basically handles everything from the moment we push our code to our repository until deploying it into production. Another thing to ensure that we are basically testing our application or deploying our application in the same condition as it's going to run through is actually to deploy it in production. And one technique to do that is canary deployment. Canary deployment is you deploy two versions of your application, the old version, the production version that is already there, and a new version where you redirect a subset of the traffic, a small fraction, to the new code. And that basically will help you to test your application against real traffic and test how it reacts against real production traffic. And it would help, hopefully, to increase your confidence over your release. The third thing is the cockpit is surrounded by deformable crash protection structures. So they build the car around this piece of structure, which is the cockpit, and they test it to check how it's going to react, how it's if it's solid against the forces generated by the crash, and so on and so forth. But they built this structure with the sole purpose in mind to protect the driver's life. And this is similar to designing for failure in software engineering, right? System nowadays not only should be designed for designing against like functionalities and features, but also should be embraced, designing for failures against network outages, database problems, network congestion, and so on and so forth. Some of the techniques we can do is enable or having mutual MTLS. And that's basically, it's mutual MTLS is mutual TLS, or MTLS in short, is an extension of TLS, where both the server and the client are both agrees, and the traffic between both of them are encrypted, which is great for distributed systems and microservices architecture. And that means even if an attacker managed to get access to our cluster, he would be in the blind, basically, because the traffic that is circulating inside our cluster is encrypted. Another thing we can do is design our architecture in a micro-segmented way. And that means we are putting the data and the services owning the data as far as possible from the internet-facing services as we can. And that means even if an attacker managed to get access of one of the out layers, he will only gain access to one of the proxy services and not the services that own the data, and he can steal the data and get hold of it, basically. The fourth thing is, before they race, drivers must demonstrate they can get out of the car within 5 seconds. And this is really important. They test it before each race. If a crash happened, I want you to get out of the car as fast as you can. So show me right now. Show me that you can get out of the car under 5 seconds. And this is not only designing for the worst case, this is actually testing for the worst case, right? And this is similar to chaos engineering practices, where we intentionally stress our system to understand how it behave under stress and under in a bad day, basically, and gain lessons and try to fix those issues that we noticed and improve it. In our systems, we all have, or we all know things, our application. And we all know that there are some gray area that we don't know, or we don't master, the things that we don't know. But the things that scares us the most, and what make the incident worse, is the things that we don't know, which is like the black area, the black hole that we don't know that exists. So chaos engineering practices, or dirt days, there are different naming, basically means that we intentionally try to break our system in order to understand how it behaves in conditions similar to when we're having a bad day. And you can start small. You can design the smallest experiments possible in order to understand how your system would behave in certain conditions. And once you design the experiment, you run it, and then you take notes of how your system is behaving and reacting to those conditions, and then you try to fix those issues that you noticed, and then grow gradually, basically. And the last thing they have is constant monitoring and replacement of the tires. And the world record for changing the tires is actually 1 second, 82 milliseconds, which is like less than 2 seconds. And look how proud they are, how happy they are for not fixing the tires, for not patching the tires, but removing the tires and changing them completely. Compare this to our attitude where we are bragging of how long our service and servers have been up for years, months, weeks, whatever that is. When the cloud era appeared, we started to talk about pits versus cattle analogy, which means that we shouldn't have a personal relationship with our servers. We shouldn't take care of them. We basically resources should be disposable, meaning that we should spend them at will and kill them at will. Now, if we accepted that analogy, we can push it a bit further by introducing the chicken analogy. We know that the cattle, for the time it reached adulthood, it's 2 years compared to chickens, which is a couple of weeks, 6 or 7. And the resources it needs for the chicken to reach that adulthood, it's a lot more less than cattle. And that means there are other metrics that we can introduce in order to improve not only security, but also the resiliency of our system, such as reverse uptime. Imagine that an attacker managed to get access to one of the nodes, and he gained the root access. That by itself, it's bad. But he managed to hide his presence and cover itself and use the node as a base to attack other nodes, or simply mine Bitcoin. Now imagine if you constantly remove the nodes and provision new ones, let's say after 1 day. So after 1 day, the attacker will lose his base. They will need to do the same process over and over again. From a security point of view, you can't backdoor a system that is constantly being replaced. So it's a great win from a security point of view, and it's also a great win from a resiliency point of view, and it's ensure alignment between both operations and security. Now combine that with the base image freshness, which is the time, or how long you take before fixing the vulnerabilities detected in the base image that you have to deploy or your services, applications on top of. Sorry. From a security point of view, you know that the maximum amount of time to release and deploy your base image, even if it's 0-day vulnerability, right? You know that the maximum amount of time your cluster is vulnerable is going to be the reverse uptime. So the smaller that is, the faster you can release and deploy and fix vulnerabilities for your base image, which is great from a security perspective. Okay, that was all for the 5 pre-crash measures. Now, let's dig into the post-crash measures, which are the things that they do when the crash is actually happening. So the first one is the driver can be extricated from the car by lifting out the entire seat. And compare this to when accidents happen in a normal car, where we lose precious time trying to open the door, fasten the seatbelt from the driver, and we might lose the driver because of that. In the Formula One, if they can get access to the car, they will basically, if they can't release the driver from the car, they basically lift out the entire seat from the crash scene and move it to a safe place and do whatever necessary to rescue the driver. And that means that they designed the car in a modular way, enabling them to react to the crash and the accident. And this is similar to having a loosely coupled system in a modular way, right? Meaning how fast you can react in terms of outages, in terms of incidents, in terms of security, certificate leak, SSH key leak, whatever was leaked unintentionally from your system. And having a loosely coupled system have a couple of benefits. First, starting with, it has fewer dependencies. If there is a failure, you can isolate it in their system and have some circuit breaker that can have a default experience rather than of none. And it helps to have this evolvable architecture, meaning that introducing new features can be isolated in its own component rather than of building the whole thing, which might take longer. The second thing they have is a hand system. A hand stands for hand and neck system that absorbs and redistributes forces that would otherwise hit the driver's skull, neck muscles. And the hand system is basically the black thing right there. What it basically does is when an accident happens, the forces generated by that accident is gigantic. Because like they're driving at a lightning speed, 300 kilometers per hour. So the forces generated by the crash are strong. So this small little thing redistributes the forces throughout the driver's body that would otherwise hit its neck and muscles. And that basically means having, from a software engineering point of view, having what we call or building an elastic architecture by adopting some of the patterns. Like if you're having a good day and you are seeing an increase in the traffic, you can have like load balancer that's basically redistribute the forces across, or the load across different nodes. Having an auto scaling, if the nodes can't keep up with the load in the traffic, spinning up other nodes that can handle the additional traffic. Having a request time threshold. If one of the services, one of the nodes is taking longer to respond, having a request time threshold can free up some of the resources and ensure a decent experience. In some of the cases, depending on the business, having a degrading performance is much better than having an error out. And also adopting and implementing some anti-overload patterns such as circuit breaking and exponential backoff can help to ensure some elasticity when you are having a bad day. The third thing they have is driver suits are fire resistant, which means that when they are in the extreme heat, when they are surrounded by fire, their suit can basically keep their body temperatures under 40 degrees or 41 degrees Celsius, which is really important, and especially for Roma, as we mentioned. He was in the extreme heat and into a fireball, basically, so he managed to survive there thanks to a lot of things, most importantly, his suit. And that's basically, from a software engineering perspective and a security perspective, trying to keep the attacker in. And there are a couple of techniques that we can do to ensure that. Hello? Hello? Yes. Starting with the least privilege principle. And the least privilege principle means that you give to your application, your node, your service, your server, the least set of access rights, and resources enable it to do its function. And it's really important from a security point of view. For example, if a service doesn't need write access, just give him read access. So even if this node is compromised, the attacker would find himself severely limited over the damage that he can do to the node. Build in layers of defense. So if an attacker managed to sneak in of one of the layers, defense in depth, he would basically find another layer that will try to block him and limit him from importing damage. Having zero trust policy, meaning that have no implicit trust of the services, the users that are in your system services. Everyone that should interact with your system, be it services, servers, users, need to have a token, whatever it needs to authenticate himself in order to interact with your services and service and application. Another thing is that is pretty hard to implement, but it's cool, and from a security point of view is really important. It's a hardware security modules. Now imagine that you have an application that handles user data, and you have a user table which contain a password, and you use a hashing function to hash those passwords. Now an attacker managed to get access to those data and exported those data somewhere else he can access to. Now he would have all the time in the world to brute force or to brute attack the password until he managed to crack it and get access to your usernames and passwords. And you won't find out until you find it the next month, year in the dark market, if you know about it. Now, hardware security modules add a layer of security into the hashing process by requesting a key from the hardware security module, meaning that you hash your password with that key, and if you want to verify your password, you would always need a key from this hardware security module, meaning that if an attacker managed to get access to your data, he would always need that key from the hardware security module. If he exports this data, the data is invalid. So you are keeping him in your system until, hopefully, you figure it out and you uncover him and you try whatever necessary, basically, to kick him out. Another thing they have is a fire suppression system that can be activated by the driver externally or by the race marshal. The fire suppression system basically is activated when it's a fire in the car. Basically, shut the car down and release some liquids to keep the driver from getting burned by the fire. And notice how they distributed the access depending on the use case. So if the driver is there and he's awake and cautious, he can activate the fire suppression system by himself. If the driver passed out and the rescue team is there, arrived first, they can click a button outside the car to activate the system. If the driver passed out and the rescue team can't access the car, the marshal can activate the system remotely. So this is similar of designing or distributing access to your application without locking yourself out and without being too pessimistic, something like that, pessimist around the security. So don't overuse your login, be pessimistic about it, and give the users the access they don't need, but don't be pessimistic and lock yourself out. So distribute the access as you see fit, basically. And finally, they have data recorders that keeps everything around the car. So even if, when an accident happens, the doctors know the severity of the impact. And Formula One are crazy about the data. With each race, they generate what is worth of 1 terabyte of data per car. And if you have ever been in a race weekend, you see that there is no data, no network around the area that is during where the race happened, where the fun happened. And that's because the data that is circulated, they prioritize the data that is circulated from the car and from the teams. And that is to say that no system should go to production without having a monitoring and logging tools in place. And also having alerting that to detect unusual behavior and trigger alerts, basically, if needed. So that would basically is for the 10 measures that basically, there are similarities between the Formula One on how they design the car and their regulations, and how we can basically adopt some of those mindset in the software architecture. But I want to end up with this image. So this is how the drivers look like in the car. It's not very comfortable, but from an aerodynamic point of view, it's really good, since it's allowed to have speed in the car. From a security point of view, it's also good, since it's inside the cockpit, as I mentioned at the beginning. So it's all about compromise. There is no right or wrong. Everything depends on your business. So you should have that balance between security, velocity, and business need as it goes. When I end up with this number from the cost of data breach last year from IBM Security, which mentions that, I forgot to change the 2022. But in 2022, the numbers there, I just updated them this week. The cost of cyber attacks is around 4 million. But what scares me the most is it takes more than 270 days to detect a breach. So hopefully throughout this presentation, we can have some patterns, some tools that we can adopt in order to enable us to increase our velocity, ship things faster, and have a secure and safe system. Thank you. I think I have 3 minutes for questions.
You do. Keep the microphone.
Thank you.
So questions for Mohammed?
No questions. Either it was so.
Are you getting comfortable on the chair? No questions? Okay, so let's have a short break.
I think he has a question.
You have a question? Stand up and be as loud as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. So from where I came from, Spotify, we have a security team that is oversees the company's security things, but the team should own. It's like more of a DevOps mindset. The team should own the reliability of their system, but also the security of the system. We have a set of tools that tell us vulnerabilities that is within our system, if there are any things that we need to fix, and basically the teams own fixing those. So it's like the security team build whatever it needs to give us insights about how secure our system is, and we have ratings, values, whatever, depending on that, basically how a system is compared to other systems, and then our system is accountable for fixing those systems from a security point of view. So from like, even if I'm back an engineer, I'm responsible for the security of the systems that my team own.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Here is your mic.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed.